All right, let's call a New Bern Historic Preservation Commission meeting to order. Morgan, would you do the roll call for us?
Yes. David Griffith. Ruth Cox. Jim Morrison.
Here.
James Herring.
Here.
Richard Frye. Joe Anderson.
Here.
James Woods.
Here.
And Trip York.
Here.
And we have a quorum.
All right. Can I ask for a motion to dispense with the reading of the minutes?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Right. Let's, and can we vote to approve the minutes? All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Now, are there any corrections at all to the minutes? Does anybody have any corrections? Okay.
I did some edits there and there.
Okay. Well, let me give the introduction to the meeting.
Did
The
we have a
historic-
motion? I apologize, Joe. Did we have a motion to approve those minutes? I didn't hear it. Okay, thank you. Apologize.
No problem. The Historic Preservation Commission is a public commission appointed by the City of New Bern's Board of Aldermen. It is responsible for preserving and safeguarding New Bern's locally designated historic districts, downtown and Riverside, based U.S. Department of Interior standards, state statutes, city ordinances, and New Bern's historic guidelines. Two of the major tasks of the HPC include improving applications for a certificate of appropriateness and preventing demolition of historic structures due to neglect. The HPC holds a quasi-judicial hearing on an application for a certificate of appropriateness. The commission hears sworn testimony and evidence provided by the applicant, by parties who receive notice of the hearing, and by others who can justify that they have relevant evidence and are directly affected by the application. The commission cannot consider comments based on personal likes or dislikes, hearsay, or personal opinion that cannot be directly related to specific historic guidelines. Likewise, commissioners shall refrain from stating personal opinion, personal likes, dislikes, or hearsay during a hearing. The commission's decision on an application is based solely on testimony and evidence presented at a hearing that directly relates to the historic guidelines. And Morgan, would you swear in our presenters?
Yes. If you are going to be speaking tonight or presenting, please come forward so we can all be sworn in together. All right. Do you solemnly swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give this evening is true to the best of your knowledge? Yes. Okay, all right, have a seat, please. Thank you.
All right, let me just briefly summarize the hearing process. The HPC administrator provides an overview of the application. The applicant or their representative will present the application. Proponents and opponents who receive notice of the hearing can present evidence. A rebuttal is allowed by the applicant and by proponents and opponents who receive notice. Others who can justify that they have relevant information and will be directly affected can present evidence. The HPC administrator presents the staff's findings and recommendations. The applicant's representative has an opportunity to make final comments on their application. Commissioners will discuss the evidence and may ask for clarification from the applicant and presenters, and the chairman will call for a motion to approve or deny the application with stated findings of fact. The motion is discussed by the commission, and the chairman will call for a vote on the motion by the commission. COA can be approved with conditions, or denied. Is there any general public comment at this time? All right.
Got something.
Joe,
Mm-hmm.
Joe, I think the mayor has something.
Oh, yes, we do have a presentation scheduled. Could not overlook the
I'm
mayor.
looking for you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, just give us a moment. We want to make sure we get this documented.
Thank you. And really quickly, before we dive head first into COAs, would you mind if we did this really quickly?
Absolutely not.
All right.
Morgan, proceed.
The mayor is here tonight to present some certificates of appreciation
You know, thanks for everybody coming out tonight, and thank you for the job you guys do. I don't know if everybody knows what HPC is all about, but there's two very important things have happened in New Bern in the last 30, 40 years. One is the condition of downtown New Bern when the mall was built and the concern of a lot of folks, and Swiss Bear got formed, and you've seen a lot of the progress because of Swiss Bear. Another thing that I remember back in the 60s and early 70s is there was a really, really nice home on the corner of Pollock and East Front Street that was torn down. It was rumored to be Blackbeard. There was this rumor that Blackbeard had spent nights there. But there was also, on the other end of the coin, there was a situation where some things were built that were considered to be incongruent to the downtown area. And so the HPC, was formed for that reason. And having said that, I really appreciate what Swiss Bear has done and also what HPC does, because if you watch the TV programs, and I watch them quite often, there's everything from liquid nail to different materials. It's just so difficult, the job you guys have, and the way that you do it. And I assume, I would say you have, what's your meeting prior to that you go through? Design and review, which kind of helps so much to, if something's not going to probably go through, the design review can kind of catch that. So again, we thank you guys so much, and particularly I had, for president, I had James Herring and Tripp Eure and Jim Morrison, and each and every one of you. Again, I appreciate the job you've done. So did you want me to do one of them?
Absolutely.
Okay.
This one is from Mr. Herring.
Okay.
Yes, would you please?
Yeah. So, City of New Bern Board of Aldermen, Certificate of Appreciation. This certificate is awarded to James Herring in recognition of 3 years of valuable service on the City of New Bern Historic Preservation Commission. And Mr. Herring, we appreciate so much what you've done for our city.
I appreciate you guys over here, if you don't mind.
And James Herring. Yeah. True.
All right.
Okay.
You and James.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Go ahead.
I appreciate it.
1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. This is from Mr. Morrison.
All right, John. You're going. 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank you. And last but not least,
Our outgoing board.
oh, hold on. I'm trying to go over there. Ready? 1, 2, 3. Perfect. Thank
And
you.
again, thanks so much for what all the board is doing to make New Bern better. Thank you so much.
Dana?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Mayor, I think it's also worth mentioning that as a past chairman of this board, that we appreciate your cooperation and the cooperation of the aldermen in our recent guidelines, updates, and ordinance updates. And together as a team, we've accomplished these successes that you've referenced. So thank you.
All right. And just before we launch into our official meeting, where we're not allowed to give any personal likes or dislikes, I would just like to comment my thanks as well to the commissioners. My special thanks to Tripp, who mentored me, brought me along. And I'd also like to thank the audience for all they do in terms of making New Bern a beautiful city. We could not do what we do. There would be no need for us to be up here if you folks didn't buy properties and rehab them, and also put in a lot of work and effort to try to follow the guidelines so that the city looks as beautiful as it does. So since during a regular meeting I'm not able to say those things, I'll just say it as my point of privilege, and we can proceed with the meeting.
Okay.
Okay. Where are we at?
413 George Street.
All right. 413 George Street.
Yeah.
Do you have any?
So this is a request is an after-the-fact request. We're all very familiar with this one. This has been continued, I do believe, at least twice. This is a request to install a 4-foot wooden fence with 1-inch spacing in the primary AVC, and to install a 6-foot fence with no spacing in the secondary and tertiary AVCs As I noted, this is an after-the-fact request, and staff is recommending that the commission deny this application, whereas the application is no longer valid due to change in ownership. There was a very quick sale, and I have tried to make contact with the applicant, and he cannot be contacted, and the application is no longer valid.
Well, do we have any discussion on that?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Chairman. I move we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for 413 George Street to be denied in accordance with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, section 15411 to 429, specifically 15423B, which requires the written consent of the property owner to appear before the commission.
I second the motion.
All right. And do we have any discussion on the motion? Hearing none, can we have a vote on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? COA is denied.
Now we can put that one to bed. Thank you.
Next item.
All right, next up, we have 207 to 213 Middle Street. This is a request to include a metal fence that will be 4.6 feet in height with a 6-foot tall gate with brick columns that are 5.6 feet in height, a 20 by 20 wooden pergola, and matching size concrete pad. Mr. Bass is here tonight, and I'm going to go and let him take the floor while I get the overhead up and going for it.
All right.
Almost queen. And you can zoom in and out right here, okay?
You and I might be a bit of a disadvantage, I think.
Very much.
Need a little bit of assistance? Yeah. Zoom in tighter?
Yeah, just
How about that?
perfect. So, we're before you today for 207 and 213 Middle Street. This is the Middle Street view. Took to heart what y'all had in your work session. We actually went down to the church and took a lot of pictures. Actually got a lot of heights, a lot of reference points. So what I found was our brick columns that we discussed earlier came in right at about 5 feet. The idea was, once again, to try to pick. It seemed like that was a good representation of what y'all were looking for. So that was what we were trying to emulate. In our application, instead of have the brick caps, we would actually have the concrete caps, and I included that in the application. Also, and that would be the brick cap. The fence, what we have is we'd actually have 6 of the pillars, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, an opening in the middle. We'd have a 4x6 entrance gate. The spans, as indicated right here, would be 16 feet between the pillars. The pillars would be 18 by 18 in width and roughly about 5.5 feet tall. The fence would give us a height of about 4.5, kind of in line with what we saw at the church on the corner, which we spoke about before. In this representation, we added weeping cherries, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 in total, to the perimeter for landscaping. We also added a little grass work right before the brick, kind of like we've seen in front of the farmer's market. This entrance right here, which we talked about, would not be a gate that swings open, actually be a rolling gate that would open up 12 feet in length, so we got 2 6x6 sections that would roll back and forth. This was represent where the pergola would be. It's 40 feet in length, stamped concrete foundation, 20 foot in width, 10 foot tall. Went by Morgan's, kind of got a picture of it. Be a lot like this, the 8x8 pillar going up, little metal brackets running across. And for the fencing, much like that of what you see when you go across the bridge. Metal fence with the little circles in between the pickets. Would be a height total of about 4.5 feet. The reference specification guidelines was 2.5.1, 2.5.2, 2.5.3, and 2.63. The brick that would be used was going to be the old colony brick, almost like that in front of the farmer's market also. So what we tried to do was look at what y'all indicated downtown that you liked and try to emulate to the best of our ability those likes. Any questions at this point?
Okay. Well, at this point, let me ask, are there any proponents or opponents who'd like to give any testimony? Yes, ma'am. You can come forward. Yeah, just come to the microphone and just state your name, please.
Good evening. My name is Kathy Guzzo. I live at 212 Middle Street. This is the second meeting I've attended. I'm going to read my speech. This is the second meeting I've attended concerning the property 207-213 Middle Street in less than 3 months. The first was back on May 8th to the alderman when I shared my experience having to make 8 calls over the prior weeks to the New Bern Police Department concerning noise, foul language, and music with no regard to time. All my calls were between 11:15 and 2:30 a.m. Yes, 2:30 a.m., past closing time, but people hanging around since they were called the last call, just hanging around until about 2 a.m. Sometimes multiple calls in a single night and early morning. Obviously, we are extremely concerned that the owner again is using first used a tent and is now trying to construct a permanent structure, pergola, gazebo, to increase his alcohol business. I ask this board, as well as the New Bern Alderman, to please consider the events earlier that I had in the spring of 2018. It is my hope that you reject this plan, as it will devalue the character of the main downtown street, plus create a negative impact on the surrounding homeowners. I am so afraid this nightmare with this lot is coming back, which means for us, we will not be able to open our patio doors. I'll be having to call the police again. The quality of life and sleepless nights will happen all over again. In the request, I read and I have the following concerns. With the constraints the buildings have on the street to keep the historic look of the town, how a cement pad with a roof over it will that fit in? What is the intent, use, and hours of this operation? Union Point closes at 11 o'clock, exactly. My third question, although the design might meet the physical requirements, does the design for the purpose meet the requirements of the historic nature of the district? Besides not fitting into the neighborhood as I described, the following business concerns that affect the feel of the area. If permission is granted to build the structure, is it then giving them permission to operate as they see fit? Is this correct? There has not been an issue recently in that location, but the space has not been used, obviously because they were planning to do this. I understand New Bern is reviewing the noise ordinance, but I would like to see this request deferred until a new noise ordinance is approved, which I do understand. I think they've already accepted. I would not like to see this structure grandfathered in or have the owner spend money on a structure that will not meet his needs or intended use when a stronger ordinance is approved. I end this concern letter by asking you to vote this proposal down, as it is a quick, cheap way to increase his people capabilities, to increase his business with no regard to the neighborhood. I would support the owner building a fully enclosed building with fixed walls, soundproofing, and doors. I have attached my document that I presented to the alderman for your review. Please consider our request. Thank you.
All right. I want to thank you, Ms. Guzzo.
Excuse me, Ms.
And,
Guzzo, before you leave, did you receive notice of the hearing? You did receive written notice? Okay, thank you. I need that for the minutes. Thank you.
Yeah, I believe from her building address, she does live within 100 feet of the property. Your building address was, your address again?
We're right across the street.
So you are within 100 feet. Yeah, so you do have standing to testify at the hearing, and we appreciate your comments. I will just say that I know there has been some action taken on noise abatement. That's not our issue. I just happen to be,
But I just thought this is an outlet that I have, and I'm very concerned because it affects us. The noise is incredible, the kids are loud, and it's devaluing my property, and I get a lot of money for my condo. And I just need consideration, and let it be it is, but I'm very passionate about this, and it's very disturbing.
understand and appreciate your concern. Duly noted. We can only, at this commission, we can only tend to things that come within the guidelines that we're responsible for. But your testimony is in the record, and we appreciate your testimony. Is there any other testimony to be given?
Could you come up, please? Your name and address, please.
John Watson, 217 Middle Street.
Did you receive written notice, Mr. Watson?
Yes.
Thank you.
My wife and I, Michael Lee, live at 217 Middle Street and have lived there since 1994. We've seen the evolution of this property turn from a mud hole that we used to call Lake Watson into this beautiful rendition of a design that I think is going to work really great compared to what he had to go through last time. It certainly by far beats the look of Middle Street that we're going to have with the roll-up garage doors and the like that's being approved now. So I think that the commission has the authority to approve this as designed. It's going to be a nice look.
All right, thank you, sir. Does the applicant wish to mention
Just answer
any
any
rebuttal?
questions that
You
y'all
do
might
have
have
that.
about the material being used, because that's what we're here for, is to make sure the material meets the guidelines. Once again, we tried to replicate what y'all mentioned in previous meetings on what your design appeal would be.
Okay, so I'm going to take it that is your rebuttal, that you just want to stick to the issue at hand.
Yes, stick to the issue at hand, yes, sir.
Any further comment from the folks that made testimony? Okay. Anyone else with any relevant information they'd like to share? Morgan, would you give us the staff recommendations?
Yes, certainly. Staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Fences and garden walls, 251, 252, 253, and accessory structures, 261 and 263. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: the proposed project is within the primary, secondary, and tertiary areas of visual concern. There are existing commercial fences in the vicinity that exceed 4 feet in height. The pergola is easily removable, and the proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines. Furthermore, staff recommends the commission approve the application for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
All right. Commissioners, any discussion?
And for me, it meets guidelines.
I think, I appreciate your attention to what we were talking about, and I know it took a lot of work to do it, so thank you.
And thank y'all for helping out with the process.
To cover the bases, I believe the landscaping is good, and a good addition, appropriate. It meets the guidelines to be not incongruous with the other properties in near vicinity. Materials are proper. I think the design is good, and I think importantly, the pergola and the fence are easily removable. They're not temporary, but they're easily removable in the future.
So, Chris, I'm in a little bit of a disadvantage because my monitor has disappeared.
All right.
But if memory serves, there are a couple of clarifications you could help me with.
Okay.
You had a number of colored renderings that
Yes, sir.
gave a sense of how the different elements you're proposing would fit in. My question doesn't pertain to locations and things like that, but one of those renderings had a fence with spike tops on it,
Correct.
which was different from the Exhibit A.
Correct. Yes, sir.
And my question is that what you are proposing with your application to have a different fence type on the middle street?
Yes, sir, they do. That way it's more congruent with what's at the church now. And then the side property and rear property would be the Exhibit A, which had the circle detail.
Okay, and I recall it was about a 4-foot 6-inch fence type?
Yes, sir.
Is that for both Exhibit A
That would
and
be
this
for both.
fence that you and I are talking
Yes,
about
sir.
now? Okay. The second clarification, when you construct your sliding gates,
Yes, sir.
there may be some things that we haven't considered up to
Okay.
this point. I don't think, for me, it doesn't need to be resolved tonight. All I would ask is that when things turn out to be somewhat different than we're all thinking right now, that you go see staff
Sure.
and seek direction on, how to proceed in an appropriate way.
Yes, sir.
Any other discussion, comments?
I have only one. When we was at the design review, you mentioned something about lights.
Yes,
What-
sir, we did not include lights in this
Okay, so we
illustration.
will not be having
Because the
lights.
column height, we decided to go without the light.
Okay.
Okay. All right. Any other discussion? Anyone care to make a motion?
I can. Mr. Chairman, I move that we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for 207 through 213 Middle Street to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinance, sections 15.411 to 15.429, and New Bern's Historic District guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. Fences and garden walls 2.5.1, 2, and 3. Accessory structures 2.6.1 and 3. And findings of fact, the proposed project is within the primary, secondary, and tertiary areas of visual concern. There are existing commercial fences in the vicinity that exceed 4 feet in height. The pergola and fence are easily removable. And number 4, the proposed project is not incongruous with guidelines.
I second the motion.
All right. Is there any discussion on the motion?
Just have one question. You got a pretty quick draw there, Jim. Guideline 5.4.3 and 5.4.4 reference wood materials being either painted or an opaque stain. I didn't see anything in the application about your intent to paint or stain the pergola.
The pergola would be stained, clear stain.
Perfect. Would you mind adding guidelines
Certainly.
5.4.3 and 5.4.4 as the reference?
Would you
Agreed.
repeat those, please, Chip? 5.4
4.3
points.
and 5.4.4. And
Thank
the difference between the two, one is talks about paint, and the other talks about a opaque stain, and either would be appropriate.
Agreed.
Okay. Any other further?
Second, yes.
All right. Any further discussion on the motion? I would just add that I do appreciate you working with us to come into compliance with the guidelines. Can we have a vote on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. And can we have a motion to issue a COA?
So moved.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
COA issued. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
What's next, Morgan?
Next up is Mike Lentz, 101 King Street. This is a request to install a dock consisting of wooden piers and wooden decking, and to install a mechanical boat lift in the tertiary ABC. And Mike is here, and I'm just going to turn him loose.
Good evening, everyone. Thank
Good
you
evening.
for
Good evening.
meeting me tonight or looking over this application. Yeah, okay. So currently, I'm basically requesting to build a marine dock out of wood with all treated marine material. Obviously, being approved by CAMA, who I would have to get approval before I got a city building permit anyway. So I have had conversations with him. I do have enough property line, and he has given me verbal approval to proceed. That's why I'm at the meeting here to get this this done, so I can move forward with the city building permit. So this is currently the back of our house, is where we're going to put it. It's pretty much right in the center of the back of our property. This is pretty much a representation of what we're going to be constructing. This is our neighbor's pier, or boat dock. It's going to be made out of wood, obviously all marine treated material. The slats will be out of wood, not concrete, as I was trying to get at the review process. There'll be 2x6s. The piers going in the ground will be different heights. I am requesting to go further down, obviously because I'm on the Neuse River. It's a little more volatile, so I want a little bit more strength there. And then the slats will be 6x6s, which will be with the walking pier will be on. And I've got a better representation of that as well. This is the rear. I don't think they need you to see that. Here is the plans review, or pretty much just the hand sketch, the scale by scale. We went out on the boat, we're looking at about 100, roughly right around 100 feet or less of piering, which will go out, and then we'll be doing an L shape to the left, which I do believe that'll be north, and then we're going to put the boat dock or the boat lift on that end, as you can see right here. As references to the plot, the pier will probably be almost right in the center of our property line right there, about where it'll start. Let's see. You know what? I sent you some of those pictures, and I don't have them. There's a picture here because I sent it electronically. You do? Cool.
Oh, gosh, hold please.
Thank you. And just scroll down with the. So you can see what I see.
No, we can't, but it's okay.
It used to be here.
You're all very attentive, though. That's very good. You all.
We had
So what I'm getting, you might not be able to see it, but.
So
anyway,
when I ask out of context questions, you'll know why.
Maybe I see computers up there.
Yeah,
This
some of us
actual-
have it.
This actual one is really going to show you what it's going to look like. As you can see, the bracing, I don't know all the proper wording, but the wood slat, which is the walkway, 2x6s, and then you got your 6x6 bracing, and then of course your wood piers. I've requested from my contractor to use stainless steel screws for the piering, so they don't rust, and they're a little more stronger because once again we'll be on the noose. The tide's going to go up and down, and all galvanized bolts holding in all the support structure.
Okay. Thank you. Fortunately, we had a very thorough design review, and you've given us a lot of paper documentation, so even though we don't have the advantage of a monitor tonight, you painted a very vivid picture for us.
The last thing really to show you is the boat lift. I'm getting an 8,000-pound boat lift. It's pretty much a non-rusting material, like I think it's galvanized I-beam, and that'll be on top of the piers at the end of that one location. It'll be up on top of these. Ooh, how do you go back and forth? Next time I'll know this. It'll be on top of these 4 piers. It'll be rested on there, and then of course electricity. I was going to show you some lighting, but to be honest with you, I can show you. I don't know if we're going to be doing lighting, but I'll show you. Maybe if it gets approved, and if I don't do it, doesn't matter, right?
I'll pass them around since we're short a monitor.
These are the 2 that I would like to go with. Both of them, well, the one style is really just a, I guess what do you call the pipe that hangs off the side? It's not a pen, is that a pendant?
So,
Pendant type?
not a pendant, but a wall-mounted
Wall
sconce
mount.
type.
And then the other one is more of a pendant type on top. And I kind of like the older material look, like an older a marine or dock boat kind of look is what I was going for.
Mr. Vice Chairman.
And note to the commissioners, this is an amendment to the application, and it's up to you to decide whether this substantially affects the application or not.
Where are the lights gonna go?
They'll be on the I don't know if you can see it, but they'll be on top of these piers, these posts. I don't know if you can see that. Can some of you see that right there?
On the piers, on
top of the posts, yeah.
Pilings.
on top of the pilings
Yeah.
for the
On
walkway.
the walkway, yeah.
Okay.
So basically,
Yes, we don't see what you see, we only see what we got from Morgan.
Well, then you probably have this, because I think that was it.
It's in the
Right.
packet.
Right.
Now, the lights is not in the packet, because that's.
Understood.
it looks like there's about a half dozen pilings, so about 6 lights.
Yeah, I probably do every other pile, so.
And are you done?
Yes, sir.
I skipped a step. I forgot to ask for testimony or public comment on this application. Is anyone here, a proponent or an opponent, who'd like to give testimony on this application? All right. Thank you. Morgan, you
Yes,
have recommendations?
yes. Really quickly, just for the record, are we agreeing that the lights are a very insubstantial part of the application and we can accept it tonight?
Well, I would leave that to the commissioners to either add that as a part of a motion or not, and then you could always adjust your application later.
Understood.
Okay, staff submits the following historic district guidelines as appropriate to this application. Waterfront modifications, 291, 294. Statements of reason based on the information contained in the application and staff's judgment are: the proposed project is located within the tertiary ABC, the proposed project utilizes appropriate materials, and the proposed project is not incongruous with the guidelines. Therefore, staff recommends the commission approve the application for major exterior alterations at this time, citing the aforementioned guidelines.
All right. Do you have any final comment before we have our discussion?
No, sir.
Okay. Commissioners?
Okay, I've got a quick question on your application. You talk about the deck material being pressure-treated wood, and then there's something scribbled over the top.
That
near-
was when it was the concrete. When I was
Okay, so that,
and that's not
just to confirm, we're using a conventional 2x6
very
wood
confirmed,
plank?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna hazard a motion, if that so suits the vice chair.
It does.
I move that we find the application for a certificate of appropriateness for 101 King Street to be not incongruous with New Bern's Code of Ordinances, sections 15411 to 15429, and New Bern's Historic District Guidelines based on the following specific guidelines and findings of fact. That being waterfront modifications 2.9.1, and if you haven't noticed, I was on a paint kick tonight, and there's a reference 5.4.5 that specifically excludes the need to paint waterfront type things like piers. Statement of reason being the pier consists of a series of narrow widths, and it's constructed of wood, and that the proposal uses traditional building materials in traditional ways. As a condition, I think Morgan will ultimately get the CAMA permit, either through inspections or you delivering it to her, just to compare. Sometimes CAMA makes changes. And then secondly, I'd ask for your understanding if we had your lighting come back at a later time.
That's fine.
When we
'Cause
kind of
might
had
not-
a chance,
I
had
was
a chance to
almost
think,
hesitant of doing it.
and staff could guide you on whether that could be handled in as an administrative matter or whether you'd have to come back to the
Not a
full
problem.
board.
All right.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Is there any discussion on the motion? All right, then can we have a vote on the motion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Can we have a motion to issue a COA?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
All right. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? COA is issued. Thank you, sir.
Appreciate your time.
Hey, good to see you again.
Bye-bye.
Likewise. Thank you.
Morgan, do you have any administrative items for us?
We do have one thing to address under new business. This is a amendment to the upcoming calendar. We can only hold a public hearing no less than 14 days after the design review. Design review is scheduled on July 4th this year, and we are closed. So we are going to move design review to July the 3rd. Also, we are moving design review from August 1st, in which I will not be present that night. We are moving it to July 31st, which is a Tuesday. And those are the only two changes that I have for you tonight. They're both relating to design review and not the public hearings.
Administrative updates?
And as long as I have a motion to accept the amended calendar, I can proceed.
Would someone make a motion to accept that amended calendar?
I move that the design review be moved from the 4th to the 3rd of July, and also the 31st of July.
Thank you, James.
Second.
In favor?
Aye.
Okay, motion accepted.
Okay, thank you, just for the record. And in other administrative updates, it has been the month of driveways. As you can see, I've done so many driveways. Also, a couple of new signs and HVAC unit, because theirs died when it was the hottest day of the year. So that's all I've got for you tonight.
All right. Are there any further public comments?
Our new commissioners are sitting out in the audience, taking it all in.
Congratulations.
All right. Well,
I'd just like to say thank you to you all outgoing commissioners. I've really enjoyed working with you from the day I got here. Thank you all very much for your guidance, and thank you all for what you put in over the past couple of years. Thank you.
second,
Certainly will.
can we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. We are adjourned. Thank you.